Aloha, everyone. I'm Cheryl Hirasa, Interim Executive Director of Pacific Islanders and Communications. Mahalo for joining us today for this virtual event. Over the last few years, we've been doing these virtual events to highlight some of the amazing films premiering in the new season of Pacific Heartbeat each year. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Pacific Heartbeat, it's our signature public television series that airs on the World Channel and PBS stations across the country. Pacific Heartbeat is one of the main ways we amplify Pacific Islander voices while building community partner that can continue to cultivate a more informed, equitable, and inclusive society. So this year, I'm super excited about having High Tide, Don't Hide as part of our 11th season of Pacific Heartbeat. It's a thought-provoking documentary that follows 4 incredible and inspiring high school students on their journey as activists and defenders of Moana Nui Kea. Today, we're very fortunate to have some of the talented filmmakers who behind High Tide, Don't Hide, and 2 of its cast members who know a little something about community power and how that can inspire change. So first, I'd like to introduce Catherine Mongella, Executive Director of Earth Guardians, who'll be moderating this discussion. Welcome, Catherine, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for such an amazing introduction. I'm really honored to be here and to moderate this lovely documentary. So as introduced, my name is Catherine Mongella. I'm the Executive Director of Earth Guardians, and Earth Guardians is pretty much an organization which really believes in empowering a youth's voice in the environment and climate justice movement. We're very fortunate to work with over 300 youth throughout the world, based in Africa, Europe, Asia, and the States. And they're all doing amazing things to really be vocal and just speak up into the climate justices and injustices, some which have been caused by the older generation. So it's a really an honor for me to be able to moderate such a discussion, which is a good mix of I like to call them as seasoned youth who saw that there was an injustice, there was an issue and a place to really be vocal, to give the youth to be vocal, and also talk to the youth who've really participated and are really active in the climate justice movement. Yeah, so enough about me. In this conversation, I will be joined by 2 of the High Tide, Don't Hide filmmakers, and as well as 2 members of the cast to discuss the project and the issues as we commemorate Earth Day. But before we dive into all that goodness, I think it's good if we take a look at the High Tide, Don't Hide trailer.
I need to introduce myself. Hi, this is my first video log for the Climate Strike movie.
I did put on the Climate Strike movie.
Do you believe climate change is happening?
I haven't made a response to that question at all.
But I'm asking you.
And I'm not about to.
With sea level rise, we're just going to be underwater.
If you go into any high school, most kids my age would tell you that climate change is their biggest worry.
We wasted so much time.
How do people keep talking about our genocide like it's nothing? Like we're nothing.
These campaigners are aghast. They want not only something done, but something done fairly radically.
You're right.
Now.
Exactly. She was like, I'm going to march for climate action. Is that going to work?
Why are there no brown voices in these conversations on these committees when this issue is affecting us?
To have it actually called out on national television, that made it a bit more of a big thing, eh?
You can't save the world by yourself. I don't think you can. But if that's becomes your only mission in life.
How many of you would be willing to risk arrest?
Would you mind if I got arrested?
ready. I can do it.
Hopelessness is useless.
We're not going to let them stand by and just talk the talk.
This is our fight, and we are here, fighting right now.
I should have brought thicker socks.
Wow, that was intense to say the least, and it's just amazing seeing that in a short clip, but the amount that we've been able to derive from that, the amount of the way the youth have been very vocal. So I think I'd love to really welcome the brains behind the documentaries, the co-producers and directors, Niva and Emily. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we can have a little chat.
You're the seasoned youth contingent. I like that.
Yes, my fellow seasoned youth. Welcome. First of all, just congrats on getting the documentary out, on getting youth to actually participate and be vocal. And just seeing the trail, the first question that comes to mind is why? What came to mind for you guys to really think that this is something that needs to be discussed about? This is something that we need to involve the youth about. Why not just say that as seasoned youth, this is something that you can talk about from your experience? Why make the documentary as it is?
Yeah, so it started like, I don't know if you remember in 2018 when the first, or not the first probably, but when the IPCC report that came out and said, we've got 11 years, recent one just came and said free, so that didn't quite work out. And there was a lot of, I think all over the world, but also here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, you could really see that people started to organize and really wanted to bring that issue, you know, to make it really vocal, to get policy changes, to get, you know, our anger and our fear. All of us wanted that to be heard. And so as filmmakers, and it started with 2 of us and then it grew to be 4 of us, we just wanted to amplify that. We wanted to be there, to just grab our cameras and go and show what's happening and be able to do what we're doing now, which is bring it to, you know, millions of people more. So that's essentially how it started. And as we started following all those different things that were happening in the climate space, whether it was Extinction Rebellion and various groups, we saw the youth coming up and just being, you know, you couldn't deny that this is the most important voice we're hearing. So that's essentially we decided to completely devote our time to follow the youth and what they're doing. Found filmmakers across the islands to follow different parts of this as it was happening.
Wow, yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I'm sure that throughout the whole process, there must have been so many challenges that you guys encountered and successes that pushed you guys to overcome the challenges. Maybe if you can share some of the challenges that you guys faced throughout the preparation of this documentary.
Well, one of the challenges is we got a huge amount of fantastic footage. So whittling it down was one of the challenges that our editor, Thomas Gleason, did a great job at. I think most people working for social change in the climate justice space or wherever will relate to that we often were short of time and resources. We were making the film voluntarily wherever we could fit it in amongst our other responsibilities to our families, to supporting ourselves, our families. So making it over the long term with the resources we had was a challenge. And we got here so few. And also I'd say that the way, like a lot of challenges, the way that Niva and Phil set up the space that we were going to work in, which was to work collaboratively, was a challenge and also a really great, rich reward. speaking personally, that we worked by consensus, so which took longer. So every part had to be agreed and we all had to be sold on every part of it, which is not the way film production or most things usually work. And what came out of that, I think, is kind of we held each other to our different strengths and pushed the film to a kind of richness that would have been quite different if we'd been working separately. And also having the group of us to, take the weight as we had the capacity to was very important, as in all social change work.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think one thing that I can really resonate with is working with individual strengths. Once you identify the strengths, I think that kind of covers any challenge or weakness that you may find throughout the process. And maybe just a little bit to take further the success, if you can all mention like just one key success that you've gotten throughout the process, or something you can say that you're taking home that you will remember throughout the whole process of this documentary. Just one.
Can I do two?
Okay.
So the first one was the first time taking the cut to the youth, back to the youth, and seeing the responses and being able to share how we've taken their story and see the responses and their involvement as well. And that was really, really incredible, sitting with all our activists, with all our heroes, and seeing people, seeing the feelings and the tears and all of that. And the second is obviously like the more success side of things. So we had a really great run on festivals. We're now showing with Pacific Islands in Communication, thanks to Cheryl, which is incredible, and also TVNZ on demand in here in New Zealand. So getting that audience and knowing what we've done is reaching millions of people. Yeah, that's just really, really exciting and really, makes it all worth it.
Thank you, Niva. That's amazing. And Emily, do you have just one?
Just one. Okay.
No pressure.
Well, it's one that we're poised to take, I think, which is that it's looking very likely that the film's going to be included in the social science curriculums in New Zealand, so that there's going to be a lot more opportunity for the film to be used and conversations to be had around it. Is amazing.
Yeah, lovely. And just one final question before we move to see another clip of the amazing documentary. Opportunities. What opportunities are there for people to get involved? One thing that I took from the trailer that we just saw was one of the youth said that you can't save the world yourself. So that brings in how can we help the youth in supporting them in saving the world in dealing with the climate justice movement? How can we get involved?
Well, one thing is, like you say, it's join a group. There are already so many groups across the United States and elsewhere working on climate justice issues. And on our website, we have, through Power Shift, a list of different, as with Earth Guardians, different places that people can join, who already have campaigns underway. So I think one thing is that look at what's around you and what's already happening and what you can take part in and build on the experiences of others, and connect with them, because that is so enriching, both for what you can achieve, but also rebalancing climate anxiety, getting a sense of connection to what is possible.
Great, thank you for that, Emily. And at that, I'd like us to see more of the trailer, a little clip, before we welcome on our youth activists featured on High Tide Don't Hide.
Thank you, Catherine.
I think we underestimated the size of how big the strike was going to be. And we were going so fast because everyone was like in the groove, like boom, boom, boom. And we were like, halfway down Lambda Key, and it had been 5 minutes, and the march is supposed to take 45 minutes. you know, we got to Parliament, there were people at Parliament, and it was so amazing. Like, I guess that was when we kind of realised our power. We did this, we mobilised this many people. The power is really in those thousands of people that show up on the day.
Again, another amazing clip, and very deep. I've gone a bit of goosebumps here, and that I'd love to welcome on our amazing youth activists, Sophie and Philly, to join the conversation.
Hi.
Hi,
Hello.
Sophie. Thank you guys for joining us. Welcome. Just seeing the clip, I think before I dive into questions, how do you feel seeing yourself and hearing yourself on the documentary? What's the first emotion that comes to mind? Is it excitement? Is it sadness? Is it, oh my God, I'm on TV? What's the first emotion that comes to mind?
Oh, I would say for me, it's excitement, it's hope, it's kind of a feeling of power and being reminded of how powerful we are collectively, and just seeing that many people in one space. I mean, we've had COVID, which has thrown a spanner in the works and meant that larger gatherings haven't been able to happen. But just to see that, it's like, yeah, it's like a wave of impact and a wave of like huge emotions, but most of those emotions are kind of hope, excitement, and a real kind of sense of pride as to how it's obvious as to how strongly our young people and people across Aotearoa feel about taking this issue really seriously and addressing it urgently. And that does give me a whole lot of drive to just keep going and capitalize on that momentum. So.
Love it. And Philly, what's the first emotion that comes to mind after seeing yourself?
I think the first emotion is definitely relief, mixed with a lot of gratitude. Knowing as a Pacific Islander young woman, the community that I come from, coming from a low socioeconomic background, being on the TV at a scale like that, especially on an issue so dear to my heart and so impactful on our islands and our people, it comes with a lot of relief knowing that a lot of our youth will see it and they'll get to understand their place in the world and their place in this issue as Indigenous people. And so knowing that the impact this film has had already, that it will go into classrooms and it'll change lives. I know that that's it's not a small feat. And I'm really grateful to have been a part of it and to be a part of this amazing collective of people. And of course, it's just going to grow from here on now.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, now the pressure is on. I mean, if I remember when I was a youth, never in my wildest dream did I say I'd want to go to the parliament or mobilize people to be vocal about something. But it's like to see you guys, you're really being vocal, going to the parliament, doing big stuff, really standing for what you guys believe in. What's the how? What's the motion that was behind it? How did you come to be active in the climate advocacy work? Yeah, as youth.
Feel free to go first, Philly.
Thank you. I think for me, it was definitely out of necessity. It wasn't something that I had looked for. It just kind of found me really when I started learning more about the effects climate change was having on my homeland, when it was having effects on Indigenous people all over the world, as we see in Hawaii with Mauna Kea, as we see in America with Native Americans going against the Dakota Access Pipeline. We see a whole worldwide collective of Indigenous people moving to protect the earth and moving against something that they haven't really contributed to the most in terms of emissions. And so learning the effects that this has been having on people who really don't deserve it, who are on the front lines of the climate fight, and who are in the latest IPCC report, they say that if we reach 1.5 degrees as a global temperature, then our atoll nations will sink definitely. And knowing that kind of impact is very much on our doorstep, that pushed me to do something, to go into action and to not really not really care about about what other people may think or what the challenges may be, but knowing that the fight was definitely worth it, and it definitely still is.
Oh, see, that's why I asked if Philly wanted to go first, because she is so articulate. But I would have just 100% total coin agree with everything that Philly has said. And I live in a small seaside village and on the coast of New Zealand, but in understanding the impact that sea level rise was going to have on my homeland or my home village in 50 years time, but then understanding, as Philly was saying, that the reality of that for people in the Pacific is it's here and now. It's not a future kind of issue. It's very much their reality. And I feel like once your kind of eyes and your heart is opened to that reality, it's so hard to turn away. And you just if you know what the reality is going to be like too, that we're going to inherit, you just can't look away. And so there's a real sense of wanting to be a part of the kind of movement for a better world, and knowing that then what we're a part of creating collectively is something we can feel proud to pass on to the generations that follow on from us too. And as Philly mentioned, with IPCC reports that just continue to be kind of put out there that say that this issue is actually worse than we expected. We've got less time than we expected. The window of opportunity is closing. It's really clear that we have a responsibility to continue opening our hearts and our minds to the people to the stories of the people on the front lines, and continue to use this window of opportunity to do all that we can and mobilize as many people as we can through whatever means and mechanisms are available. And as Philly said, this film is a great way of doing that, and there are so many others, so many other ways too, but it's just important that we continue to raise our voices and really be aware of the realities of what the climate crisis is doing to lives and livelihoods here and now.
Love it, love it, love it. And talking about realities, and we were able to hear from the co-producers and directors of the documentary that there were some challenges that they faced, but they're speaking from the perspective they're behind the scenes. Now you guys, as the activists who were actually in front of the scenes, actually doing the activism, what were some of the challenges that you faced, specifically being youth activists?
One of the biggest challenges for me was not only coming in from a different perspective, coming in representing all the different communities I have behind me, but having to face the challenges that come with that and the intersections that come with my identity. So when me and my peers came into the climate strike movement, we weren't expecting to face racism on top of fighting for climate justice. But I guess it comes with the reality of it all. And that was a challenge. But if you see in the movie, it's a challenge that I think is handled a lot better than I would say some adults handle those situations. For high schoolers, I think we handled that really well. And mitigating that and making sure that we were actually all on the same page, all going for the right thing. That was a challenge, but it was definitely one worthwhile.
I love that you said it was one worthwhile. Yeah. You're saying, Sophie?
Yeah, I would just completely agree. I mean, and in the moment, there were definitely some challenges that were obviously floating in the midst, and it was great that they were kind of brought to the fore of the whole movement. And I think that added so much to the movement and made it so much more meaningful, and able to really create space for the voices who needed to be at the front of the movement, and really carrying the voices of the climate justice movement, especially in the youth kind of sector of that, at the forefront. And so we are just incredibly, Philly mentioned gratitude. I feel a huge amount of gratitude for those moments of challenge and self-reflection that I had throughout the whole journey that the film encompassed, and that I continue to have now, because it's extremely important that we recognise both Aotearoa's history, but also the history of how the climate crisis has been caused, rooted in colonisation, rooted in the continuous degradation of our planet, and seeing ourselves as separate from that, which is something that Indigenous peoples do not see or do not do. And so I think it's so important that we continue to reflect on those learnings. And Philly's so right, like it's only kind of issued a challenge to the climate movement to become more intersectional, and to essentially say that that's the only way we're going to make changes, if we really create space for the voices that most need to be heard. And in this conversation, it's those who are most affected on the front lines, but also those who hold the solutions. And in most cases, those people are the same. And so it's important that that space is created. And I really thank Philly for working in this really kind of amazing way that we now have an awesome, I can't even do that. but we now have such an amazing relationship, which could have broken us and it could have broken the movement, but it's instead strengthened us, strengthened the movement and made it more intersectional. So, yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's just really touching. Before we go further with the conversation, I think it's great if we watch another clip.
She is just 16 years old, and our next guest has a message for the world's leaders. Climate change is killing Pasifika people. Please welcome Aigagalefili.
Do you think that's the key thing missing in the conversation about climate change? Is the voices of the people that are being affected by it the most?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, an example of that was the student climate strike. The first strike was held actually on the first day of Polyfest, which is the biggest Pasifika festival in New Zealand. And South Auckland schools, predominantly brown schools, often participate in that. So we kind of have to ask, who are the people making these decisions? And why are there no brown voices in these conversations on these committees when this issue is affecting us and our families and our homelands?
So true.
We got rightfully called out for for not having enough diversity within the school strike for climate. So we called a emergency national meeting, and everyone shared how they thought that what was said was true and was fair criticism. And then we moved to try and connect with them. I'm Māori myself now. I'd always kind of talk to like an inside joke with some of my Māori mates that the school strike for climate is so white. But to have it actually called out on national television, that made it a bit more of a big thing, eh? So some new people today, that's great to see.
At the beginning, SS4C thought that we wanted to be a part of SS4C. And I knew in my head, I was like, no, we can't, because like we've said so many times, it has to be us telling our story. We can't be brown tokens. Like, I was so sick of being a brown token, I didn't want to be it anymore. But then I can't let my emotions get in the way of what needs to be done.
It has to be us telling our story. After seeing that clip, it is apparent that our youth are very passionate. It's apparent that they know what they want and they know how they're going to get it. And it's apparent that we as seasoned youth need to do a more active and better job in supporting them. So again, a big round of applause and congrats to Niva and Emily for just getting this the ball rolling for us to really support our youth. And it just begs me to question and think about the importance of representation and marginalized communities stepping forward and having their voices heard. Before welcoming Sophie and Philly to comment, I just wanted to hear, it's like for like a few seconds from the side or perspective of Niva and Emily being behind the scene. Was this something that you guys took into consideration, or was it something that you just found yourselves having to change the direction of the film to be more sensitive to issues of representation and marginalized communities?
So really for us, seeing when Philly went on the project, I mean, as soon as I've seen that clip, I was like, we have to talk to Philly. We have to make sure we have this, this narrative, this important, issue covered, and to see what's gonna happen with it as well, because I don't think we could have continued doing the film and not deal with, whether it's unintentional racism
Yeah.
that was not an option. So yeah, I'm not, I think, well, none of us, no, Phil was, but I'm in Thames, so I wasn't familiar personally before, and I'm an immigrant as well. I wasn't familiar with the community in South Auckland before as much. So yeah, it was really, for me, it's amazing that I had this opportunity to get to know Philly and to be able to get to know this community so much better and to bring that story into the film. And definitely that's been, I think, for us as filmmakers also a process, and it was really important to do it together and to do it with, you know, a full, a really deep relationship, so that we make sure that we're doing it right as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Niva. Now throwing the ball back to our youth activists. What do you guys feel is, as specific as youth active, what do you feel is the importance of representation and marginalized communities in terms of stepping forward and having voices heard?
I think if we aren't able...
You feel there's a need or importance?
Yes, definitely. I feel if we aren't able to be there for the most vulnerable that are affected in an issue, then we aren't tackling the issue in the most effective way. And we are not reaching the full scope of what actually needs to be dealt with. I think that climate change as an issue, it can't simply just be about the environment, because the environment is people, the land is people, and the land and the people have history. And so for the marginalized communities, especially our indigenous communities, that history is thousands and thousands of years old. For that to be all undone in a matter of a couple hundred years, well, it's an understatement to say that that's unfair. And it's even more unfair to be leaving them out of this conversation. In terms of being from South Auckland and our narrative in the movie, I think that I was very acutely aware of the way that South Auckland was perceived on a national level in New Zealand, often seen as the ghetto or the poor kids or the dumb kids, especially with the school that I was going to as a low decile school. And so with our narrative and our stories, I felt really protective of them because I didn't want it to be another example of the media running along and pushing their own narrative and not being our own. And so with this movie, it's one of the very few genuine depictions and genuine takes I've seen that actually come and they actually talk to people in South Auckland, and they don't try to project what they think about us onto us. They let us tell people for ourselves. And so that was it's a beautiful example of representation, of what representation truly looks like, what consultation truly looks like, and the actions that I followed from the movie, they just continue to prove that. So, yeah.
Love it. Thank you, Philly. And Sophie, what do you feel is the importance of representation and marginalized communities and having their voices heard?
Huge importance. I don't think there's a word that can express just how important it is, and also its importance kind of at the foundations of any movement or organization or just person's life, to have an understanding and a real ability to be aware of and to listen to the voices of people who have differing perspectives, and also the voices who, as mentioned, need to be at the forefront of this conversation if we are to systemically address and transformationally address the climate crisis. So we're not just tinkering around the edges, and as Philly said, kind of a few environmental initiatives here and there. What we need to actually fully and sustainably tackle the climate crisis is a systemic and a structural change to the ways in which power is held in New Zealand, to the ways in which we allow voices to be involved in conversations which directly impact our people and our planet. And currently the way that we're doing things just does not allow that. And so I think what the film showed, and what it hopefully will continue to show, is an example, continue to set an example for how these conversations can happen, and how they shouldn't not only happen at a movement level, but also like not at just the kind of people power level, but actually happen at a level of leadership in our country. Like, these are ways of collaborating, ways of respecting each other, ways of being in each other's spaces and in the space of the planet, which actually need to be kind of truly taken a hold of, I think, by our leadership. And you know, we have ways of being leaders in our own right, but you know, there are people who hold the levers of power who need to also, I think, see the huge importance that ensuring the voices of those in marginalized communities and underrepresented communities are front and center. So huge importance, and I don't think it can be expressed enough. Yeah.
Love it. And I think just watching the clip and hearing from all of you guys, one thing I can really commend the directors and co-producers is that they gave you the power to really control the narrative of the importance of representation in marginalized communities, number one. Number two, I'd really like to commend you guys, the youth activists who are actually in the documentary, something that I'm a firm believer in. As you can see, being Black is that when you're given a chance to be vocal, you can choose to let that take control over the narrative, or you can choose to really stand forth and be vocal and really stand for your community. So from what I've seen from the clip, that's something that you guys have really took on headstrong, that this is an opportunity you've been presented, and you didn't waste it. You made sure that you presented not only yourselves, but the communities that you guys have come from as well. At that, we'll take a short break and watch the final clip, and this one will be featuring both Sophie and Philly.
We demand that our elected leaders pass an ambitious zero carbon bill with cross-party consensus that gets us to zero carbon by 2040. We demand that our leaders end fossil fuel exploration and extraction in Aotearoa. We demand that they invest in a regenerative and renewable economy right now. So to you, our leaders, we say that change is coming whether you like it or not. We will use our people power and make the change needed, no matter how long it might take. There is too much at stake.
Because of the inaction of our societies, I have worried whether it's even safe to bring a family that I would love to have into this world. Homes, families, and futures are being destroyed as we speak due to climate change. So how can I hope for a future for my children?
Hopelessness is useless, because in times of oppression, if you do not stand, you are siding with the oppressor. So do not feel sad, brothers and sisters, feel angry. Today, we draw the line.
Because you know what? It's our islands that are sinking. Let the south side rise and not the sea level. This is about all of us. This is our fight, and we are here fighting right now. So let us be for the culture. For everyone.
One word that comes to mind, wow. The final clip was definitely powerful, to say the least. The emotions, truly palpable. I'm literally speechless, which I shouldn't be, but it was just amazing to watch, to see all the emotions. And this is just me watching the documentary. I can only imagine what it was like for you guys, for Niva and Emily shooting the documentary, and for Sophie and Philly actually being parts of the documentary. Would you, if you wouldn't mind, could you just share with us what that day was like, Philly and Sophie, as leaders of the strike, and in regards to Emily and Niva behind the scenes as a team capturing the story in real time? What was the day like for you?
I think for me, it was definitely a big wave of, again, relief. It felt like we had worked so hard to get to a certain point and to see it all our manifestations, all our hard work come to fruition on that day. I can't really describe the feeling. It was just such an outpouring of hope and love and support and resistance of such a dire issue. And I think that right there, that day, the way that everyone came together, that was resistance. That was a prime example of the power of youth, of our Indigenous people being able to finally get the spotlight that they deserved on the issue that we've all been so anxious and so scared about. And so even though the climate issue and climate change, it gives you all these negative feelings, seeing the love that comes from people when they pull together, that almost outweighs it. And that hope, it's so important in moving forward. So that's the feeling that I think I will take away from that day.
Thank you, Philly. And Sophie?
Wow, yeah, completely agree. And just had like tears welling up in my eyes, and I seem to always do, and we, especially when we rewatch that last clip, it's a feeling, and it's something that's so hard to articulate. And
yeah,
Philly just nailed it on the head with everything she just said, and a word that really rings true to me is purpose. Like everything, it just felt so purposeful. We were there, we were together, we were all raising our voices, we were all united from, different backgrounds, lived experiences, different ages, different walks of life, different areas of Aotearoa New Zealand, to say that we will not stand by and watch our homelands, our cultures, our future, our planet Earth, like this home that we share. We will not stand by and watch this be destroyed, and we will resist any further degradation. We will resist this continued inaction, and instead we will present the government with an alternative future. We will present you with hope. We will present you with this energy that you can go ahead and use and make, hopefully, that the Aotearoa that you want to create, use it and make it a reality. Like, we were truly showing up and just giving every single thing that we had, every single inch of our being, every single inch of our voice, and our voices were extremely loud and powerful. And so yeah, purpose just rings true, because it just felt like in that moment, and still today when I watch it back, I'm like, yes, we have such a purpose, and especially collectively, and such a responsibility and such an opportunity to use this closing window of time to truly demand transformational action on the climate crisis. Because if we don't, and if we let this moment in time slip by, what kind of ancestors will we be? And watching that back, I'm like, we can do it. We can so do it, because we're already on the way, like we're already on that path. And yeah, there's so much hope.
Thank you. And Niva and Emily, the side of being behind the scenes, how was it for you?
So 3 of us were also shooting directors. So for me that day, I was just shoulder mounting a camera and running like crazy. Just mad rush of adrenaline, trying to capture everything that was happening, and trying to be, we had, I think, 10 camera crew all over the different locations. So keeping up with what everyone is doing, and just literally just it was such an amazing day. But literally for me, it was just pure adrenaline, just running around with the camera, it was so amazing. Just even in Thames, we had the most people ever in the streets of Thames, I think, ever, and then seeing what was happening in Auckland, seeing what was happening in Wellington, and just knowing we're getting, this amazing turnout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of us, we felt completely a part of it. You know, we weren't documenting in a neutral sort of, yeah. So just, yeah, amazing. It was so amazing.
Yeah, what Niva said, it was completely exhilarating, and there was one moment that really stood out for me. It was when Sophie was on stage, and my microphone wasn't working properly, and I was kind of fiddling around and looking at, and then suddenly Sophie started speaking, and speaking with such power and fervor and clarity. And behind her, you can see in the film, different ministers who going outside Parliament, listening to what she had to say. And it was, first of all, hearing the power that was coming out of my friend, and but also seeing how it was landing with those elected politicians who had such admiration. And you could see in their faces, they were saying, please bring it, please make us do these things, you know, give us the what's the word? Let us do what you're asking for by pushing us. So it was what the power that was created with all the people coming together, and the vocal points of these amazing leaders was exhilarating.
I can imagine what that must have been like. We have one question from the audience. If you don't mind, I'll throw it out there, and then we can continue with our conversation. The question is from Sean, and Sean is asking, the Ecocide initiative aims to make environmental destruction the 5th crime against peace at the International Criminal Court by amendment of the Rome Statutes. Sea level rise is a form of ecocide. Please discuss how you have engaged with this initiative. How and if you have engaged with this initiative. I don't know, for Sophie or Philly, is this something that you guys have considered as youth activists, or is it something that you feel that you can start digging into to consider to look how you can start engaging with the aspect of sea level rise being a form of ecocide, if you're not already engaging in it?
Oh, no, yes, definitely. Speaking from a more personal experience, in the Pacific Islands, almost every day, it seems, people on the land have to build seawalls to stop the sea level rise. Just recently, there was a cyclone in Tonga. Oh, there was a volcano eruption. And it was so bad, the sea level rise, that it was actually washing out the graves of loved ones to the sea, that people had to go out and retrieve to bring back to the shore. And so it is definitely a form of ecocide. Ignoring it, there's a phrase that is used in the film as well, which is that ignoring climate change is Pacific genocide. And that still rings true more than ever today. It is definitely a crime in my eyes. I don't see how a corporation or a government can get away with passing legislation, with doing things that can put people and whole communities in danger, and how it cannot be a crime. I don't see how polluting the water of indigenous people isn't chemical warfare. I don't see how not listening and not engaging with these communities, not making sure that their livelihoods are taken care of and that their rights are actually met in terms of health, how it's not a violation of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. So many of these things that exist to protect us and exist to keep us safe have been violated. And so I think it is an amazing initiative. I think that it's definitely something that everyone should be looking into. And I myself am going to be looking more into it after hearing about it. So thank you to the person to Sean, who posed that question.
Yeah, some great food for thought for everyone. I just had one quick question, which I just wanted to throw out there, and I think it's from the perspective of, I'm asking from the perspective of being a mother. One thing that I took from the documentary that really hit home was a statement saying that, where I think it's Philly, you were asking your caretaker if they would be okay with you being arrested. And I had to ask myself as a mother of two, would I be okay with my kids being arrested for a cause that they believe in, for a cause which unfortunately I, as a seasoned youth, had some hand in making them engage. And I don't know how what I'm sure I'll probably have to watch the full documentary to hear your caregiver's response as to whether they'll be good with you being arrested or not. But that's as a parent or a caretaker, that's something which is not nice to hear, and it's something that really makes you think to the core as to what your role has been in making there be no other alternative for your child to put themselves out there like that. So I don't know if that's something that you guys have thought about, like the whole aspect of I'm putting myself out there, I might be arrested, but I'm good with that. And what were your caregivers' reactions? Were they a bit scared? Were they really supportive that I support you 100% in the movement? Well, just give us a little bit of a hint. Don't give us the full story, but just a tad bit of a hint.
No, my mom, she was an island mom through and through. So she was worried, of course. I myself I still am so passionate to the point where I think that sometimes the laws are unjust. And so in terms, not that we're out there doing all this crazy stuff in order to get our point across, but I think that the issue was that we were trying to hold the line at the strike, and there was the question of whether we would get arrested for that. And so I was aware of my mother, as a brown mother, was aware of how it may be different for me and my peers to get arrested than if, say, my white peers were to get arrested. And so that was something that we had discussions about as well in the movie. And I think Sophie will have some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I actually asked my parents a similar question, and they were kind of like, yeah, if it's something that you're passionate about and you are willing to put yourself on the line in that kind of a way, you have full autonomy to be able to do that. And so I respected that response and was grateful for it. And I also had some conversations with my grandparents in the lead up to the strike, and my grandma kind of repeatedly said, like, I'm kind of glad that I'm the age I am because of the way the world's going. And that's really when it hit me that I didn't ask her this specific question about being arrested, but it was like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty crappy about this world that I'll be leaving for you and for your brother and for your generation. And so do what you've got to do, and I'm right here alongside you. And I think that's the amazing thing that we saw in September. So the final clip there was from the last strike in 2019, where 170,000 people across New Zealand went on strike for climate justice, and that was intergenerational. And so my grandma actually joined me for that strike and was like, like she was right there. And although she was on the sideline, she was there, and it was that real powerful moment of, obviously this is an issue which young people are feeling particularly passionate about because of the real high stake we have in kind of the future, because we'll be the ones who will inherit inaction or action and pretty much every decision that's made now. But we obviously have families, we have communities, and we're connected to them, and our stories and our history and our future is connected to them. And so it was an awesome kind of showing though of that intergenerational impact and power that the movement has.
Love it, love it, love it.
May I put a wee plug in here?
Yes, please.
I just want to put a plug in for the power of stories, actually. One thing that I really appreciate about the range of what Helena and Lillian and Luke and Sophie and Philly bring with their stories is the different ways to make change from within the system to non-violent direct action. And last night I had an interesting experience. Because of Philly's talk in the film about your activism, Philly, being partly influenced and sparked by the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, I was I was more tuned in to hearing another Indigenous activist from New Zealand talking at COP26 about how in the US and Canada alone, Indigenous resistance has stopped or delayed greenhouse gas emissions to the equivalent of 1/4 of annual emissions. So that is incredible. That is huge and influential. It works, and sharing stories about what works helps breed more things that work. So yeah.
Thank you for that addition, Emily. Love it, love it, love it. So yeah, as we wrap up this amazing conversation on Earth Day, one final question: what is your vision for our collective future related to the environment and the world we share?
I don't mind kicking us off, but maybe we can kind of collectively build a picture, because I'm sure there'll be things that we can each add on. My vision is one of climate justice. It's one where we live in harmony with the planet, where we recognize that our well-being and our survival is inextricably connected to that of nature and other species that we share this planet with. It's one where we see emissions drastically decrease right now. It's one where we do not continue to see this huge increase somewhat exponentially, it seems to be currently, when we know that we have more oil and gas in our reserves here in New Zealand than we can afford to burn to remain below 1.5 degrees. So it's absolutely crazy that we are still continuing to explore for and extract oil and gas. So we must see a complete stop to that, and a complete kind of refocusing in on some of the ways that our world needs to be, both, where we need to be getting food for ourselves, how we need to be moving around, getting from A to B, how we need to be designing and constructing our cities and towns, how we need to be living. But ultimately, and to make all of that happen, we need leaders to lead. We need we need those in power who have the levers to go, yes, we recognize this is a huge issue. We recognize we have, such a stake in this too, through having children, through having this responsibility. It's time for us to step up and take leadership over seeing our country's emissions reduce. And yeah, that needs to happen now. We can't continue to, as you're saying, put young people through this and having this weight on their shoulders and having to feel this relief when we're able to mobilize the people that we are able to mobilize. Frankly, we shouldn't have to be doing this. And it would be ideal if the visions that we had for the future were already the visions of those in power. And so power needs to be used with a purpose, and a purpose to creating a world that we can feel proud to pass on, not to create profit, not to, further, pursue people's personal interests, but to create better for the collective.
Love it. And Philly, your final word in regards to the vision for the future.
I think the future looks like people really embodying and living what it means to put the earth at the forefront of what we do in our lives and what we do in this world. I think that we need to stop censoring humanity. We're not the main characters of the universe. The earth will move on without us if we do not treat it right. And so I think that looks like honoring Indigenous people, land defenders. I think that looks like looking at the systems in each country. For New Zealand, there's constitutional transformation through Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It looks like honoring what we live on and who we live for. As Sophie said before, what kind of ancestors will we be is really the main question that I have at the forefront of my mind. And so the future looks like us answering that question in the best way possible, and not doing it for our own selfish reasons, but doing it as a collective. That's how I reimagine the future in my head.
Wow, thank you, Philly, for ending us with a bang. Something to really take home and really think about as young activists, but as also seasoned adults, is what kind of ancestors are we looking forward to being? What kind of legacy are we going to leave for the next generation? So as we end, I just really like to send gratitude and thank you to Niva and Emily for really going above and beyond in this documentary. Philly and Sophie for representing the youth activists, and for all four of you guys for really being in conversation with us, and everyone who has joined us for this special event presented by Pacific Islanders in Communications. You can watch High Tide Don't Hide on PBS stations across the country. Check your local listings. There's also going to be a free downloadable facilitator and discussion guide in development with prompts and activities you can use to continue the conversation in your own communities. All you have to do is visit the PIC website in the next couple of weeks to access the free resource. And also, if you want to learn more about Earth Guardians and the work that we do, you can just log into our website, www.earthguardians.org, or we're on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You just have to Google Earth Guardians and we will pop up. So yeah, from my home to yours, thank you guys so much again, and happy Earth Day, everyone.
Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.